going to be prepared day one, January 2025.
Would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
A nationwide abortion ban, a Christian government, LGBTQ and minority rights revoked, with interracial marriage and racial integration on the chopping block under a Supreme Court that has no respect for precedents. On January 20th, 1981, on the steps of the U.S. Capitol, former actor and Governor of California, Ronald Reagan, delivered his inauguration speech as President of the United States. He had won the election in a landslide, completely shellacking his opponent, incumbent Jimmy Carter. Yeah, it was a pretty big win. And in this speech, Reagan said before thousands of people these words.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. It is time to reawaken this industrial giant, to get government back within its means, and to lighten our punitive tax burden. And these will be our first priorities, and on these principles there will be no compromise.
A fiery startup to the new presidency, but he was clear on where he stood. Government is the problem. There will be no compromise. No more big government, too invasive. For decades, the conservative machine has run on that theory by Reagan, wanting to reduce the size of government and retain privacy. But in fact, it was a lie. Because behind closed curtains, they were expanding the role in the executive branch for Reagan under his term, under the euphemism of unitary executive. Huh? What does that mean? Exactly. By using a bigger, lesser-known phrase to everyday people, it'd be easier to consolidate power that way. But they don't tell you that, or at least they never will. In fact, they act flabbergasted when you ask them about it or just sinisterly laugh it off behind closed doors.
I don't need you to interpret to me what other people have used.
No.
You're telling
I'm answering
me
your question.
You're telling me you don't know what the unitary theory means.
I don't know what you mean by it, no, Mr.
You don't know what I mean by it.
Anyone else?
Do you know what you mean by it?
I know exactly what I mean by it. And
well, what do you mean?
Sentences.
Tell me.
With absolute executive authority. And I mean absolute.
I'm Jeremiah Patterson. Happy New Year, and this is The Jeremiah Patterson Show. On today's special report, we'll be talking about Project 2025, the conservative undoing of America's Republic. Shortly after Reagan won the 1980 election, a relatively new conservative think tank group approaches him and gives him 3,000 pages. And what lied in those pages was a 20-volume package on how to swing the government as far as right as possible and how to implement the plan expeditiously. They really were not afraid to tell the new president-elect he wasn't conservative enough. So they presented him with a report, a 3,000-page manifesto on how to consolidate power and instill conservatism in at least every part of the U.S. government. And for a second, you might think, that's sinister. Reagan wouldn't go for that, would he? Possibly. He's one of the good guys, right? No. And Reagan didn't just go for it. He went all in, handing the report to every single person possible and even employing some of the authors of the report at the White House and in the Reagan administration. And when these guys approached Reagan, they were reportedly clear on what they wanted. Abolish the Department of Energy, revoke all executive orders requiring affirmative action for minorities and government or contracting, strip civil agencies of their powers to, quote, make an example of them, strip the EPA of its federal control, reduce the National Security Agency to basically nothing, essentially mean clear house, boost the defense budget, develop a new strategic bomb, increase military spending, crack down on domestic radicals, and downgrade OSHA, which makes sure that you are safe at work in terms of safety guidelines. Apparently, Reagan's transition team director, Edward Meese, was so anxious to get his hands on this freshly new hot doc, and after reading it, he referred to the Heritage Foundation as, quote, a pretty good group of people, end quote. So you can see where this is going. The Washington Post called the report a chest hope of the mainstream right wing. A year later, Reagan is president, and the Heritage Foundation comes to check up on him and gives the guy a grade of a D. He was scoring about 60% with them. Reagan had implemented 60% of more than 2,000 proposals offered to him by the Heritage Foundation, who authored this report. It's still really horrifically frightening, but they said that he was moving in the right direction, but he just needed to do more. That sentiment definitely got noticed by the New York Times with this headline: Heritage Foundation disappointed by Reagan. Later on, having initiated more of the group's work, Reagan cited them as playing a central role in his success for his term and second term. But that report from 1980, published by the Heritage Foundation, has clear and direct ties to something bigger today, known as Project 2025. You see, the name of the report first published back in '81 is Mandate for Leadership. If you look closely at Project 2025, you'll find the same thing. Mandate for Leadership, the conservative promise. By that logic, they're basically trying to finish what they started under Reagan, except this is on steroids. It's draconian, absolutely nuts, scary as hell. It's worse. But they seriously plan to do this if a Republican is elected to the White House next year.
What is Project 2025? It is everyone here. This is the movement. We are going to be prepared day one, January 2025, to hit the ground running as conservatives to really help the next president.
And in order to understand this, we first must break down the key components into 4 different parts. Firstly, the report begins by blatantly saying winning elections is not enough. We must rescue the country from, quote, the grip of the radical left. And they plan on doing that by instituting this new agenda on day one of the next conservative administration. They plan to, quote, unite the conservative movement and the American people against elite rule and woke culture warriors, end quote, whatever that means. And importantly, they note that there are high stakes here, quote, if we fail, the fight for the very idea of America may be lost. Wow. Let's dive in. So in this 920-page conservative manifesto written by former Trump administration officials and conservatives are incredulously wild assertions and policy stances that would give the Founding Fathers a heart attack. Let's begin with part 1, policy and supporting positions, which plays heavily into the unitary executive theory that was conjured up under the Reagan administration to give him more power for deregulatory efforts. Every president since has exercised more power, but the real concern is absolute power and declaring the other branches submissive to the executive branch. Where unitary executive theory comes from is basically the misinterpretation of the Second Amendment, a conservative play, as they like to do with multiple other things, including the Second Amendment. Anyways, that's where you have to hit pause, because no branch out of all of the 3 can be more powerful than the other. They all must be equal to keep each other in check and prevent corruption and tyranny from prospering. Yet, no one listens. What conservatives are recommending is gaining absolute power in all federal agencies and dismantling the administrative state. So agencies like FEMA, DHS, the FDA, which makes sure your food is good, the EPA, which makes sure you have clean water, and others. You know, why would we want that? It's not necessarily constitutional anyway. A potential second 9/11 because DHS is gone, therefore bye-bye TSA, is also on the playing field, presumably because this overhaul of essential federal agencies must happen because the Constitution does not warrant them, therefore they must go. So this is what they're selling here. They further hope to expand presidential power, essentially making the presidency so powerful that he's unaccountable to the legislative branch for potential investigations or impeachment, and that they're impervious to the judicial branch for rulings against their agenda. It would effectively ensure that the president has unchecked power, creating a dictatorship in the U.S. Because under this theory and plan of theirs, they also want to dismantle the FBI and basically hand DOJ over to the president as a proverbial prosecutorial firing squad for his political enemies and room for anyone he wants to throw in jail on some draconian drummed-up charges. By invoking the Insurrection Act on day one, as listed in their plan, this would essentially favor law enforcement and the military being used against civilians and arresting anyone the president seeks to be imprisoned. A complete violation of the Constitution, but who cares? It's just a harmless plan for the next conservative administration. What could possibly go wrong? Absolutely everything. And they put that into fine writing, too. The president would essentially be above the law, a government overhaul would be immediate, and federal agencies deemed non-essential or useless to their cause would be eradicated. If that were to happen, which is a serious political possibility ahead of this year's presidential election, it's going to be hell on earth. And that's not even the worst of it.
Good evening. In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court today legalized abortions. The majority in cases from Texas and Georgia said that the decision to end a pregnancy during the first 3 months belongs to the woman and her doctor, not the government.
Even before the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the 50-year precedent Roe v. Wade, which the court first upheld in 1973 that guaranteed women the right to an abortion, there were major signs of rumbling and test in multiple conservative states. From abortion clinics being shuttered by states to 6-week bans and legislators becoming creepily more invasive into what was said in women's doctor's appointments, it was no surprise when the Supreme Court finally overturned Roe v. Wade completely in the summer of 2022, evoking national outrage and mass protest. What Project 2025 guarantees is not just getting rid of abortion, but banning it nationally. If a Republican wins the 2024 presidential election, they will seek to make abortion illegal nationwide.
In the Congress, be aware of this, the Republicans are plotting a nationwide abortion ban. They cannot be allowed to have a majority in the Congress to do that.
That means no exception whatsoever for rape or incest. You'll be forced to bear the child of your rapists. So abortion would be illegal, and get this, women would have to report their pregnancies to the government. Let me just say that again. Women would have to report their pregnancies to the government. We would be effectively living in a dystopian place. It would no longer be recognizable as the United States of America. It would be completely eccentric and different. Presumably your menstrual cycles would also be tracked as well. And if they already gutted Roe, why not, keep going? Let's go after Loving too, the Supreme Court ruling that makes interracial marriage legal. But hey, why stop there? We can just keep going after that as well, Let's get rid of Brown versus Board of Education, bring back segregation in schools. These terrifying plans are not just a 920-page document floating on the internet. This is actually their plan to actually enforce and to do in the new conservative America that will be of 2025, when they believe that their righteously elected Republican candidate will have taken the White House and will implement this in the first 180 days. That is their plan. That's where they're headed. Yes, it's terrifying, but there's more. Buckle up. It's going to be a crazy show. Over the years, conservatives have used euphemisms to hide their nefarious practices and blatant racism. Whether it's states' rights for discrimination or traditional values for a homophobic backdrop, they never really say the quiet part out loud. That was until Trump. What, did you really think we were going to play that on air? Absolutely not. He's already had enough airtime. We're not making the same mistake as 2016. Anyways, Trump saying what he meant was obviously going to be a game changer for the Republican Party. It radicalized the base in a way that no other candidate had been able to before. The true side of conservatism was coming out, and from every corner, the neo-Nazis had a room, along with the white supremacists and violent enthusiasts, band together to declare their undying love for Trump. This openly racist and xenophobic rhetoric, along with his extreme ideas, drove him to the White House because it was so popular enough and gave them essentially a safe space. The party capitulated, and the worst of them was brought front and center. The Republican Party capitulated. And it is with that capitulation that opened up the door for one of the worst people ever to join their ranks, take over the party, and allow rampant racism, authoritarianism, and fascism to flourish unchecked in the Republican Party, even by the highest members.
Friends, delegates, and fellow Americans, I humbly and gratefully accept your nomination for the presidency of the United States.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for supporting this special report on the Jeremiah Patterson Show YouTube channel, Project 2025, the conservative plan to destroy America. This report actually took 9 days to edit, just like the whole thing. Is because I mainly recorded this just strictly for the podcast, and so I had to put graphics over everything. Because of that, I'm not going to finish editing this video, and I'm going to redirect you to my podcast, The Jeremiah Patterson Show. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and I'm going to let you finish listening to it there. This is a really essential episode, probably one of my most essential episodes that I've ever done before. And then once again, tomorrow, remember, here on YouTube will air the live official version of my interview with Gavin Thompson. He is a dear friend of mine. He also is a person that gives very much perspicacious insights on topics such as these. And he gives you much more of a clear insight than I do when it comes to explaining this report and where exactly we're headed in 2024 and also with Project 2025. So thank you again for watching this special report on the Jeremiah Patterson Show. Take care, and I will see you tomorrow for part 2 of this episode.